Viva Chile, viva Chile, a Chile quiero, chileno yo soy.
Welcome back to Red. Let's try that again.
Viva Chile, viva Chile, a Chile quiero, chileno yo soy.
Welcome back to Red Hot Chile. Your host, Dr. John Coben here. Sorry for the abrupt ending last segment there, but we're having some difficulties with the equipment here in the studio today. That's at least I'm having to manage all this stuff myself, and so it ends up if something doesn't work right, like my mouse or something doesn't get clicked, it ends up causing a little bit of other chaos elsewhere. At any rate, just to finish up what I was saying about the people in Valparaiso, seeing all these people, these volunteers, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people showing up to do cleanup, the tuberculosis shots, things like that people are concerned about. I'm not sure I'm in favor of tuberculosis shots, but they think there's a real problem up there, and there may well be. I don't know, and I say they, I mean government. Government often invents things too, so I'm not sure I really believe it, but let it pass and say, yeah, they're doing that kind of work up there too. And it was just nice to see Chileans be so generous with their time and money and donating so many products. Now, there's a lot of foreign aid that's been rolling in, 2 people coming in to help the fire victims, and they're going to end up getting structures rebuilt. And the biggest problem we seem to be having is where to store all the stuff that's coming in. There's just gobs and gobs of goods here now, and people are using them up, but there's no like warehouse. It's just sitting vacant in Valparaiso, and so it's been a problem for where to store the stuff. I think they're managing these private groups, or the government are managing how to handle these things pretty well, but those have been some of the issues. So Chile has really survived a couple of very big disasters this year, and of course just 4 years ago there was another disaster. That 2010 quake was it was an 8.8 in a widely populated sector of Chile, and of course was quite devastating. But compared to other countries, I think we do pretty well here in Chile, and I don't want to say I'm proud to be a citizen, because not being a statist, I'm not much for citizenship or singing the national anthem or raising a flag anywhere. I mean, I don't like states and what they do in general, but seeing that being a stateless person is a bad idea, and you got to have a state, I'm pretty glad to have Chile as my state, if you because they tend to leave me alone. But also, if you think about it, I mean, they're pretty well prepared. You got to have some pride for this, and I guess, if you call it that, anyway, maybe it's not pride, it's not the right word, but I remember when the 33 miners were rescued from underground. Remember that whole thing? It made international news, and Chile got, according to the New York Times, $2 billion in free publicity, and they finally got those guys out. Well, I made a comment in the Chilean press at the time that, look, let's not forget, there's really these 2 Americans, Jeff Hart and I forget the other guy's name, that skillfully came when the other drillers failed and hit the nail right on the head and picked right, got exactly to the right point to pull those guys out. So let's remember that Americans are your friends, and Chileans don't deny that. But there wasn't enough credit given to these American guys for doing that. And but by and large, Chile does do a good job with its own engineering. They seem to build buildings, and especially since post World War II, that hold up very well. If you're buying real estate here, some people have asked me, maybe I shouldn't buy any real estate until unless it's been built after the 2010 earthquake or something. That's not necessarily true. Remember, there weren't that many buildings that fell down during 2010 earthquakes. I mean, there was one that fell over in Concepcion. There's some clay stuff that, adobe that all fell down in different parts of the country. But as far as major structures that you would be interested in investing in, new homes or apartments, those things made it through just fine. And they're built to withstand this kind of stuff. There's just a huge amount of real rebar and concrete that's used in Chilean buildings, and it's been that way ever since World War II. The Chilean quake was a big one in 1939, and it killed 25,000 people. And since then, Chile totally changed its perspective and goes over the top with its building standards, and they're quite serious. So I think that anything past World War II, you're fine, not going to be a problem. And certainly in the last 5 years or 10 years, you probably even have tougher, stricter standards that have come up And so, great, you know, you won't have a problem with Chilean real estate, even if it's gone through the quake. There'll be repairs, structural repairs to, you know, finish work and stuff. But in terms of the structural integrity of the building itself, that seems to to stand up well to earthquakes and problems, you know, well, earthquake problems in Chile. We have tidal wave problems or tsunami problems on the coast, and those seem to be fairly well handled nowadays. It wasn't in 2010, but I think going forward it will be. And volcanoes, well, Chileans don't generally live near volcanoes, even though there are technically 2,000 of them in the country and 138 are named. There's a blog entry on that at EscapeAmericaNow.Info if you're interested. But the smoke and ash goes to Argentina almost exclusively, you know, 90-some% of it. So it really messes up Argentina, which, you know, well, doesn't affect us here. But Chile doesn't have many other natural disasters. No tornadoes, enough hurricanes. The things that are really terrifying in the U.S. just come drop out of the sky and just wipe you out. That's a pretty horrible thing to happen. And it's almost funny when you hear people just so scared of earthquakes who come from places that have lots of tornadoes. Pretty bizarre, for me, at any rate. Chile is a great place to live as far as that. You should feel a lot more security, and that you're by coming here, you're not going to be just, you know, jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. At least in terms of natural disasters, things hold up very well here. All right, more information. Excuse me. In Chile, what's going on here? We have the students upset again. Now, the students were always upset when Jose Piñera was president because they wanted free education. I'm talking about university education. And they wanted to eliminate the ability that private universities have to earn a profit. They believe, and the Constitution does say that, you know, private universities are not supposed to be able to have a profit. So what they do is they would you know, have a real estate company that would own a bunch of buildings that happen to be university buildings, and they'd rent them out to the university, like Universidad Andrés Bello did this, Universidad Finisterra, these kinds of universities, and all the rent amount would be set every year according to what the profits were. So all the profits would go out of the university. They would have zero profits for the year, and it would just become rental income to this company. Well, right now the government is really cracking down on this fact, you know, as if it's something new or you know, unbelievable. It's been going on for 25 plus years. What they want to do is you know, bring charges against these people who own these universities. And this is rather devastating for Chile. It's a stupid policy, as most socialist kind of policies are. And the students were marching at that time about this lucro, as they call it, you know, filthy lucre kind of idea. It's an old Spanish word, and they think that profits are dirty, you know, coming from this Marxist sort of ideology that crept into Chile in during the 20th century. They're also complaining about ending the co-payments they have to make. When they go to college, they have to make some kind of additional fee, even if the state, through its loans, or the university through its programs, ends up paying a good portion for them. They still have to pay some amount. They want to pay nothing. They want it absolutely to be free, and then they want the selection process to be fair, which means they want anybody who wants to go, you know, it's just this pie-in-the-sky fantasy. Anybody who wants to go, regardless of their scores, basically, gets into university. They're able to continue on and not pay a dime for it, which means somebody else, of course, has to pay, namely taxpayers. They don't seem to quite get that, or if they do, they just think it's a just thing to do, that the wealthier people should pay for them to go to the university. Very anti-libertarian idea, and it's also quite stupid, because what's going to happen is the state, when it takes over these universities, if that's indeed what happens, or closes a bunch of them, will reduce the amount of places that people can go to school or who can study. Now, those people aren't going to be able to go anywhere, because they're not going to be able to get the test scores up high enough, because they haven't got good enough training before then from high school. They're not going to be able to enter university at all. Now they have an opportunity at least to go, even if they flunk out. It won't be the case under the new plan, but yet they're pushing that. And the problem students have, and why they want to march again, is the guy Ezeguirre, who's in charge of, you know, the education, as a minister of education, is not coming through, and it's sort of waffling, I guess. He's not coming through with the promises to get rid of profits, to get rid of the co-pays, and to get, you know, maintain a very high quality education while having a wide open selection process. So that's big news in Chile, and the students are on the march again. I think it's kind of ironic that leftists march against leftist governments, but I'll be glad to see it, and I hope they do. I hope it has lots of great disturbances over there, so the world can see that these leftists never are satisfied with anything until they have pure Marxism, pure destruction, pure poverty, pure misery, and inflict it on themselves and other people, because that's all this stuff ever brings. It's not going to be of any way, shape, or form, helpful to Chile. But it is an issue right now, and you should be aware of it. So on the one side, you got Chileans being very generous and volunteeristic all of a sudden, a new trend for them, and on the other side, you still got them being greedy, wanting to have their cake and eat it too. They want to go just to get into the university. They think they're going to get out and be a professional. Not everybody can be a professional in the first place, let's face it. But even if they could, it doesn't mean just going to the university or getting admitted is enough to get you graduated so you know something. And when they lower the standards like they do in Chile for some of these private universities just to keep the money flowing, it's a real disaster. And people graduate not knowing a thing. I would not hire Chilean students out of a private university unless they were personally known to me or somebody I trusted. So I always had, and when I was teaching in the university, 3 or 4 really good students a year that, out of 150 or 200 students that I saw that year, that did a good job. They were there by accident almost. Maybe they transferred out of another good university, or for some reason they didn't go to a good, better quality university in the first place. And they are worthy of getting a job, and they should be employed. Know what they're doing. But the great majority of them aren't worth anything, frankly. And the Chilean people often complain it's not worth going to these private universities because you end up making just, a few $100s a month more than you would if you never went to university at all. That's right, folks, because if they can't go to university, they don't have the skills to do it, they ought to just go get a job. It's a waste of their 5 years to sit in the classroom. And when they get out, the market's not fooled. They understand these people aren't bright. They aren't really capable of solving problems and doing things well. I asked that question. Where'd you go to school? If you're a doctor, where'd you study? If you're an architect, I don't want the guy building my house or operating on me if he went to these private universities. Forget it. It's too risky. And you should do the same if you come to Chile. By the way, make sure that they've got a good degree, and if maybe they validate it by studying in the overseas for part of their term. Maybe for anyway, you know what I'm talking about. You're listening to Red Hot Chili and the Overseas Radio Network, and we'll be right back.